Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela De La Mora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers. I'm coming to you from the end of Pi's spring break. We had the most amazing week in Mexico City. It was so needed. I knew that for one, when I stay in my house and my kid is not in school, I just end up doing busy work and just not feeling refreshed. It's literally have to get out. Granted, we don't always need to hop on a plane and go somewhere, as I've had to tell myself. But for sure, I think the change of scenery, can be really important for us, especially if we're someone who is in an environment where that's where you raise kids and that's where you work and that's where you live. It's just sort of you need a change of scenery in order for you to A, rest, or in some cases think differently. And so it was really, really good. It was so nice. I went to visit my friend Liz and her husband RC and their dog Milo. And Mexico always feels like I feel like my soul is full, my cup is full. My body feels calm. I feel connected. I feel grounded, really, really, really grounded. And I absolutely needed that after a very busy first quarter where, I basically kind of had just come back from a year of burnout and just emotional burnout, decision fatigue, all the things. And it was really nice. And so she goes back to school tomorrow, but I feel really differently about it. And I think that's the most important thing that lets us know we're rested is you feel ready and you feel excited and ready to go and all the things, right? So will probably lend itself to an analogy that I wanted to share with you today. So this will probably be a quick episode. If you have ever spoken to me or had a conversation with me, whether you're my client or not, you know that I often speak in analogies. Sometimes I'll close my eyes and I'll pause for a second and I'm like, okay, how do I want to say this? And it'll either be an analogy of a physical thing or of something in our lives that you can relate to, especially when it comes to explaining complex topics. I think this is probably a neurodivergent thing that so many of my concepts even have been born from drawings and circles and triangles and all the things, but it really helps my clients to come back to this concept over and over again because it's anchored into something they already understand. And this particular analogy, we're going to talk about how sometimes you think you've been doing something and it isn't working but this is what happened. I was talking to a client of mine the other day and she's been in business for a couple of years, but has a full-time job and hasn't always been, let's say giving her full-time focus to her business, but has a brand that she has grown over the last few years. And as I usually do when I'm responding to private clients, it's usually right after I've dropped off my daughter at school and I'm driving home because it's the first time of my day that I'm okay, I'm alone, I can think. And there's something about driving. I don't know about y'all, but there's something about driving. I think it's because your body is in the zone. It can't get distracted. So it's you're driving and my best thoughts and analogies will come to me during that time. And this is often some of the things that I've recorded that are some of my concepts is I say it in a voice memo to a client and then I will literally take that transcript and I'll save it and then I'll teach it. And so sometimes let it be okay that some of your best concepts will come from when you're not trying. It's generally not when you're trying. It will usually be in response to it's just happening in the moment, especially for those of us who are coaches. Our best work comes from in response, right? In the moment and bottling it up. So we were talking about how this applies to anybody, right? But especially I would say if you've been in business for more than a couple of years, because we swear we have done all the things, right? And it's okay, I feel I've been trying and doing this and my sales feel inconsistent, or maybe they're coming from referrals, or possibly you had a sales dip where you had a couple of really good years or one really good year, something that you just can't get back to. And you feel you've been solving the same problem for a long time or you've been sitting in the same problem for a long time. And what I said was in that moment was, okay, we're looking at the amount of time you've been experiencing this problem. It's not the same from the amount of time you've been solving this problem. Now, people get those mixed up because you think like this has been an issue since, end of 2023. And you swear that you've been trying to fix something since 2023. And maybe you have, but maybe you've been solving it from the same lens. It's kind of like you're trying to do the same thing differently versus something completely different. And let me explain. So, and this is where I think people think like, I don't know if I lost my demand, or I don't know if my business is going to work, or I don't know if I need to change my offers. And then people will do crazy stuff. They'll do big things when you don't actually need to do that, or they'll lower their prices, or they'll go and they'll launch a low ticket offer, or they will expand to another platform. And it is so important to diagnose the correct problem. And diagnosing the correct problem isn't always easy, but I think that looking at all of the different things that contribute to not only sales, but sustainable growth in a business will help you see it from like a bigger lens. So what I said to this client, and I was like, oh, I need to teach this because this makes sense, was that sometimes you think you've been trying to solve this problem for a really long time, but you've really just been sitting in the problem for a really long time. And you've been trying to solve it, let's say through content or selling more just in your content, but you haven't been solving it in like visibility or in your thoughts about your offer or in the fact that you don't have like enough, things that you do in your free time in your own life. So you're fixating everything on your business, or because maybe you actually changed your pricing or you've changed your messaging too much. Like it's all these different things. And I'm like, okay, you think you're solving it, but actually you're solving it in a way that isn't fixing the problem. And there's all these other ways. So I told her about this plant that I have had for several years. It's a Monstera. I bought it when I was in Portland in 2020. So I've literally had this plant for over 4.5 years at this point. It grew, like it outgrew the pot. I put it in a bigger pot, all the things. We moved to a new house. It still kept growing, but it started dying. And I was like, wait, like I don't want to overwater it because we also don't want to do that. So you could do something too much and that could hurt your business, for example. So this is an analogy for business. I don't want to underwater it because then it gets dried out. But then I like moved its location and I just was like, okay, I started to cut off some of the dead parts of it, but then they weren't growing back. And so I was like, I just think that this isn't working because I feel like I've done everything. It's like I put vitamins, like the plant vitamins. I've tried to water it more, but then I think I watered it too much. And then I cut back on it and then I moved its location and then I did all these things. And then I put a little bit more dirt in the pot too, like fertilized soil. And I messaged my mom and I was like, I feel like this Monstera is just like on its way out and it's like not. I don't know what to do. And I feel so attached to it because I remember buying it at a Trader Joe's, like when I first moved to my little apartment in Portland. We now live in San Francisco. And I just feel like, like plants, like they go through it with you, right? And so I was like, I don't want to just be like, okay, this plant is just dead now. And like, that's it. Like that made me feel so sad. And then she comes over. And this is the important part. Like I actually had done everything that I could to solve this problem. So just like you with your business, maybe you have done everything you can think of that you know to do to solve a problem, but it's also very hard when you are also very impartial to the problem. That's the thing. It is so much easier to solve problems when you're impartial to the problem and you're just like, okay, but typically you're hella not impartial to your problem when it comes to your business. You have all these thoughts about yourself, or you're like, oh my God, it's affecting my money and I actually have bills to pay. So like, how am I not going to freak out about this? Or you're sitting and you're comparing yourself and like we make it this big existential thing, which is why it's so much easier to solve problems that feel more neutral, or why it probably was even easier for you to solve problems in your job that you either have or used to have if you're a full-time entrepreneur. But in your business, it's like, oh my God, like you're trying to solve this problem and there's all this stuff on your back and it just feels so hard. So let me just explain that. So this is me in a plant. Yes, I'm emotionally attached to this plant, but it's easier to solve this problem about this plant than it is to solve stuff in your business. So I call my mom and I was like, Ma, could you just like look at the plant? Like, I feel like I've done everything. And she's like, oh, and she picked it up and she's like, look at the roots. Like the roots have wrapped themselves around the plant. And I wouldn't have thought to like pull the whole thing out. And she's just like, okay, first of all, there isn't even enough room in this pot. Like you could put more dirt at the top, but that's not going to help the fact that the plant is strangling itself with its own roots. So she took it And then she starts chopping off roots. And I was like, wait, can we do that? I didn't know that we could chop off roots. Is that going to kill a plant? She's like, no, we're going to chop off some of the roots. And then she cut off some of the dead pieces and then brought a bigger pot over. I had fertilized soil, whatever. Anyways, we put it in a bigger pot. We put vitamins in it, cut off the roots. And then she put it in water for a while. Again, I'm telling you all this because I'm like, I would have never, ever thought to do this. And she put it in water to help some of the roots grow back out. Then she repotted it. And now the plant is thriving. And I told my client this, where she's just like, yeah, I just feel like I've been trying at this for 2 years. And then I said, if we were to zoom out of your business and actually look at, like the machines that take your heart rate, and it's just this little blip, or maybe you have like an Aura Ring tracker and you track your stress, right? And then you see a big ass spike and you're like, what the heck happened at 6:05 p.m.? Like I must have been stressed out, right? No, so maybe let's say this, if you have an Apple Watch, anything that kind of tracks either physical activity, stress, whatever, and you were to zoom out, even if you were to look at your stocks right now, right? Like some of them are not looking super great right now, but I'm saying anything where you could zoom out and you're looking at today, but if you were to look at this month, this quarter, this year, 5 years, right? Like let's zoom out. Look at the little blip, look at the little chart, and let's look at what have you actually done differently and what have you done that is active problem solving and like looking at your data, not just in your thoughts. And then tell me, how long have you actually been trying to solve this problem? Has it been for 2 years? You've been in business for 2 years, possibly you've had this problem for 2 years, or however amount of time you've had this problem. Let's say for you, it's demand, it's whatever, booking sales calls. How long have you actually been trying to solve it differently? And have you had somebody, because this is what I did with calling my mom, have you had somebody else helping you? And the somebody else is so important. It is so important, you guys. It doesn't matter. Even if you're a marketer, I'm a marketer. I was a marketer before I was a coach. And because I am not impartial to my problem, I need somebody to come in and be like, Mariela, have you actually done this? What about that conversation that we have? Had you done that? Is that really true? Or wait a minute, it kind of looks like you're making up a whole bunch of stuff to do here, but is that actually going to solve the problem? It sounds like you just created a whole project for yourself, but is that project actually going to solve your problem? So you need someone else in there with you diagnosing the problem. And let's say the problem is booking sales calls, right? And I will say this, that you think you've been solving it, but really the last 6 months, you were like focusing on your healing, or you weren't being coached, or you just tried to sell more in your content. But really, it might be a bigger thing. Like, do you actually need to focus more on collaborations or visibility? Or maybe you've been way over indexing on selling and you haven't actually been storytelling. You haven't actually been shifting your people's perspective. Have you actually been talking about the thing that matches up with your intake forms? There's so many things that could be the actual problem that you haven't even really been solving. You've just been sitting in it. But if you zoom out in the little blip and you zoom out in the little chart and you look at your actions, have you been actually doing something different? So I say this because, and I'm going to share a couple of things that it typically is. So other things you could try. And let's just say for you, because this is the most common issue, right, is booking sales calls on demand. That it could be, and I'll use the garden analogy just because we started with it with this plant. And I say this to give you hope, to tell you that time doesn't solve problems in business. Like it does in the sense that it gives you wisdom. It absolutely gives you wisdom. You come out with some battle scars, you do. But just sitting in it over time, being like, oh, I'm just gonna try more. I'm just gonna like do this for longer. Yes, that helps. But you also do need to be looking at like, well, what is actually happening in my business? And what have I been trying that's different, that's like rooted in what is my business telling me? Like, what are my clients telling me? What have people said on sales calls? What are people saying in their intake forms? What's happening when I'm actually interacting with my clients? What's happening in the market? Are people having different concerns, different reservations, different hesitations? Are they saying yes for different reasons? Are they saying no for different reasons? Am I showing up differently to my own marketing? Like there's a lot of things that make it to where we can sit in it for sure. And we can absolutely, like, you have to become adept at doing this as a business owner, no matter what. But it really is important to have a way that you problem solve this. So there's a few things that I will leave you with when it comes to, let's say the issue for you is troubleshooting demand and booking sales calls. So number one, and if we think about this as a plant, is that sometimes the plant isn't growing, right? You're like, okay, I want the plant to grow. And we need to look at number one, visibility. Like, have you actually been this is the most straight up, like, how often have you actually been marketing, letting yourself be seen and making offers? That's like daylight. So everything else doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much soil, it doesn't matter the pot, it doesn't matter any of that if it doesn't have daylight, right? So sometimes it's as simple as let's give ourselves some neutral facts. Let's look at what your marketing has been the last 3 months. Where and how many times have you posted? Have you made invitations? Has it been just email, just on social media? Like, what has that been? And not just that, because sometimes people get caught up in that. So if you actually are doing the action of visibility, right? If you are doing the action of posting and sending emails or whatever's in your marketing mix, then the next thing, and you're making offers, then the next thing would be, what are we actually saying? Are the words actually matching up with the desires and the challenges of your ideal clients? That is where going into your applications and having them in a spreadsheet and having them in columns, which is like, here's the challenges, here's the desires, here's why they wanted to work with me specifically, here's why they decided to take action now. Those are probably the most important questions to ask, is the challenges, the desires, though, why they want to work with you or your agency or your brand specifically, and why they decided to do this now. All of those things will give you insight into natural sense of urgency. What is it about your brand specifically? And then words, their actual words that will tell you, this is how I describe what's difficult for me in this season, or this is how I describe what my desires are. Your clients don't necessarily need to be super struggly to come to you. My clients aren't, but it will ground you back into their words. Another thing, and again, anchoring yourself back into, like, it's what you're saying. It may be that you're posting, but posting doesn't necessarily create clients. It's what you're also saying. It's messaging. Would also be, if you were to drop in your transcripts from your sales calls, the ones that you've had, especially with your best clients that you really, really love, look at what are some of the common themes. You can drop them into ChatGPT and say, can you take what this client said and expand and give me a few phrases that this client said in terms of what are their challenges, what are their desires, and can you give that to me? And you can actually just create a whole bank. In my mastermind reclamation, we have something called a client brain bank, and that client brain bank, I now transferred it to ChatGPT just because it's easier to work with. But I started by uploading my applications into it, and then I started by uploading sales calls into it. So again, it's like you're informing it with what are they saying. So again, after that, it is actually messaging. It's speaking to their current situation and then speaking to how they think about what it is that they want versus the way that you think about it. This is something that you're going to have to do regularly because we naturally want to get up here in the clouds with the way that we talk about things because we use what we know against ourselves. It's kind of like we're so up here, but our clients aren't thinking that. They're thinking in terms of very, very simple language. So that's another thing. It's like once you are being visible, then it's what you're saying. After that, I will look at who's in your audience and are you doing like lead generation? Are you being visible in places that will put you in front of new eyes outside of your own platform? So that would be things like planting seeds. So in a garden analogy, that would be like, are you planting more seeds and not just like this particular plant? Are you giving it like fertilizer, like all those things, right? That are going to help you grow it. So sometimes it's kind of like the plant has grown as far as it can grow, but maybe the pot is too small now and you need to expand to another pot. That's like lead generation. Or this little plant is doing well, but now you want to expand your garden and you need to plant more seeds. So anything that has to do with expansion, it might be a bigger pot, it might be planting more seeds. But again, much like a garden, our sales and our businesses are very similar. So in other cases, I might be like, okay, when's the last time that you actually did a live with someone else or were on somebody else's podcast or you did guest speaking in a membership or a group program and figured out how can what it is that you offer complement with what that program has to offer. If you do service-based, you still can come in as an expert, as a service-based entrepreneur and still lend your expertise to that group and just bring in your thought leadership, right? So it could be speaking, it could be podcasts, it could be collaborations, it can be lives, it can be anything that just gets you outside of your own platform, or it could be using a platform that experimenting and choosing one platform that's a little bit more algorithm friendly, because I would say Instagram isn't really, not anymore. So it might just be like, okay, my clients, for example, who took their emails and just went over to LinkedIn are doing great. Typically, if you haven't been on LinkedIn and you start to repurpose your emails to LinkedIn, you'll do great just because if you have a following on there, it just lends itself more to that. Or if you start to go on Threads and you like that, some people really like that Threads doesn't require like images or posting, just being on a platform that's a little more algorithm friendly, that could also be getting yourself in front of new eyes. So sometimes that's the problem, is new eyes, but the right ones, right? So that's another layer. And if you're also doing that, then at that point, I would look at like, What about you? How are you feeling? How are you feeling about the work that you do? Sometimes what happens is that you are doing the steps and maybe the messaging is correct and like all of that. But like there also are low hanging fruit opportunities or things that you're not doing because you are actually exhausted delivering the work that you're delivering. This is a problem that I will see much more on my clients who have reached booked out status and they kind of plateau. And typically, a lot of the times, you're keeping yourself safe. You are staying at that level of growth. Again, no problem. It's not a problem, but people will stay at that level of growth because they don't feel energetically safe or open to receive more, whether it's more eyes, more clients. It's kind of like, wow, if it was this much work to get these 7 clients, or if it was this much work to launch, or if it was this much work to do XYZ, or this caliber of client, they will just pull back at that point because they feel like it, and that's almost like a plant overgrowing and then being like, it's okay, it's not a problem, we just move it over to a bigger pot, right? But the overgrowth doesn't have to be a problem if we don't make it a problem. But I think sometimes what will happen is people will pull back because they felt exhausted getting to where they are. So we will also look at that. And so it's all of these different things. Or sometimes what happens is you think you've been trying the same thing, but you actually have changed your offer. You've changed the pricing, you've changed the duration, you've changed the little, some of y'all are really, some of my clients, you're doing it too. If you listened, let's be honest. Okay? When you're selling your offer and you're doing these little tweaks, every time you do these little tweaks, it shifts brand awareness. It's kind of like it restarts the clock a little bit in brand awareness. So sometimes you think you've been doing it, but you've been meddling, you've been tweaking, you've been fidgeting with your offer. Okay, this is so important. So this is kind of with the plant. You're going in and you're like, well, let me move it to this corner of the house. Well, let me move it to this corner of the house. And like you've been over meddling to where you don't even know where to begin because you've been tweaking. Have you been also doing that? So let's look at, I would literally write down whatever your current problem is, you're in the middle of solving it. What are the things that I have actually done differently to solve this problem? Out of that, which ones do I actually think were like reactive or that I did for long enough to know? Because you have to try something and then try it for long enough to know if it's going to work or not. Because you can't just do something one week and then the next week you switch to something else. What are those things? And then figuring out from there, like which ones did I actually legitimately try and to do for long enough to where this actually solved the problem? And then what are the things that I haven't, like if it's hard sometimes to ask yourself that, this is honestly where I would say like you either need really strong peer coaching or you need a coach. What are the things that I literally haven't even thought of? What if it's none of those things? Right? When's the last time that I actually did lead generation? When is like, have I been over indexing on a particular type of content? Like over indexing on selling is actually a thing. Like it's how you're selling, right? You could be over indexing and you haven't like shared your story, you haven't done connection content, or you haven't done like thought perspective shifting content. Like, have I been over indexing on something? And how do I actually feel about receiving new clients? Like if you were to receive 10 clients tomorrow, what part of you would go, holy shit, I don't know if I want these clients? Like what part of you is resistant to the thing that you're actually trying to call in the first place? And then on top of that, like, have you actually had somebody else in your actual business besides you? And if you haven't, that's also generally part of the problem. So here's the thing is, if it comes down to you solving a problem in business, isn't going to just be one thing, right? But the skill of problem solving within your business is something that is going to pay off because you're never going to not be doing it. And I wish that I could tell you like, okay, you do it and then you get to this place and like everything is great. But the thing is what happens is once that works, once the problem solving works and you get the result, then it's like going into a new level in a video game where you have new challenges and new problems. And so that's never going to stop. What happens then is what I call problems you earn. So my clients who are in leadership circle in reclamation, I talk to them about that often to say the people who are in this room are bringing problems they've earned. That's why we're in this room, is that we're talking about different challenges that literally you did not exist when you were just trying to figure out how to book sales calls. When you're trying to figure out how to book sales calls, then you figure out how to close those sales calls. Then you figure out how to like over deliver and do, create client retention and referrals and all of that. Then you have new problems that have to do with team, that have to do with sustainability, that have to do with systems, that have to do with more eyes and more responsibility, right? If you were to think of if problem solving could make me infinite amounts of money And wouldn't it be worth it? If problem solving in my business was going to give me infinite amounts of money, wouldn't it be worth it? And who could help me? To be honest with myself, to solve this from a neutral perspective, because the problem itself is generally way easier than we're making it out to be, depending on how we feel about it. And again, what makes problems in business difficult to solve is not that they're insurmountable, because really, it's just like the plant. It's like the plant can only need so many things. It's not 50 things. It needs water, it needs light, it needs like vitamins, something, and it needs soil, and it needs a place to grow, whether that's a pot or something in the ground, right? That's it. Like, that's really what it is. And so when it comes to business, it's like you need visibility, which is like actual marketing. You need messaging. You need lead generation, connections, like actually talking to people. That's like seeds, like planting seeds. You need support. So like, what's the pot that you're in? Like it needs to be contained somewhere. And so if it's only those things, if it's visibility, let's say it's visibility, messaging, you need support, you need lead generation, and you actually need to deliver on your offer very, very well, right? So it's not that it's super complicated. It's just that our thoughts about solving the problem become complicated because of what we make it mean, because of how our nervous system feels while we're trying to solve it. And this is why I say, like, it's so important for you to have support while you're working in your business so that you're not in a silo, because what happens is that we come up with conclusions, and those conclusions, like, we don't even realize that we're not looking beyond it because we're the only ones sitting in it. And you will get better at it over time, right? And honestly, like a lot of like when I think about my results in my business, they really were preceded with a lot of decisions and being like, okay, I have an exhaustion problem. I have a sustainability problem. I have a marketing systems problem. I have like, what are all of the things that I need to actually solve? And then look at the data and be realistic with myself and just be like, where, like, because you coming in and having thoughts and judging yourself and shaming yourself is not helping you solve the problem. Like, what if it all were neutral, and what if it all were solvable? What would you do? If it were all neutral, the problem is neutral, and it was solvable, and what have you not done, and who could help you? What would those answers be? What's the problem? What if it was neutral? What if it was solvable? What have you not tried, and who can help you try something different? Okay, that's it, y'all. My laundry's done. I'm gonna go downstairs, finish my Sunday. I'm going to take my daughter to a play date. It's so funny because I'm like, she's 8. So I don't know if it's still called a play date, but they're going to hang out, and the moms are going to hang out and talk and stuff. So it'll be fun. And then we're back into everything tomorrow. But if you are in a season of your business and you know that you're freaking tired of sitting in the same problem, get in touch with me about private coaching. Okay. This is literally my job, not just for solving problems in coaching businesses or service-based businesses. Like, I'm a marketer, so I'm used to looking at like, okay, like, let's actually define what is actually going on. And this is why when I onboard you as a client, I ask you so many questions. Literally, my onboarding process in itself, some of my clients have to take a little time to do it, but it's like an x-ray. Like, we are taking an x-ray and I'm asking you all of this stuff. And some of them are like, oh my gosh, I feel bad because when I answered the questions in the onboarding process, like I'm not doing this. And I'm like, that's fine that you're not doing it. It's not, we don't need to come in and judge it, but at least we have information, right? And I'm not saying you need to do all these things, but it is important to work with a coach that's going to help you audit all of the things that you're doing, that you've done in the past, get data around it, and to take you into consideration, your life. What are you actually doing on a day-to-day basis? Are you growing this business on the side of a full-time job? Like, I have a client where part of me auditing and helping her is looking at the fact that she's commuting hella far to work every day, and she has a daughter, and she's growing this business. So it's like, we also need to look at you and your life, because part of the plan needs to consider your actual capacity that you have in your life. So I'm not going to coach someone who's a full-time entrepreneur who's in year 5 the same way that I'm going to coach someone who has a full-time job and has a child and has to commute into work. Like, we're going to have to also adjust our strategy, because some of this is going to have to do with you making sure that you have the capacity that you need in order to be the person that you need to be to show up for your life and yourself first, and then your business, right? So there cannot be like a one size fits all, but the ingredients are similar, right? So like, the ingredients are all there. It's which ones we pull and in what order to make sure that you can get the results that you want and have them be sustainable. That is my job as a coach. That was my job for 16 years as a marketing director, is to solve problems from a neutral place. But it's just a little different. It's a lot more fun when I also get to coach the human behind the actions, because the human behind the actions is in most ways more important than the actions themselves, because the human is the person that has to actually do the steps. They have to feel safe and supported. They need to feel like their plan is doable for them and where they are in their life, but also expands them at the same time. They need to feel heard and seen and safe, right? So that's all of what we do in private coaching. The way that it works is we meet every other week. There's a couple different ways to work with me. So we meet every other week for 6 months. And in between, we have, we use Telegram to communicate back and forth. And so essentially what happens is at the beginning, we'll have a VIP day. And this is where we audit and we look at everything in your business. And we literally from the discovery call to the VIP day, we look at the main components of your business of, if you did these 3 things, this would change everything. Like, these are the 3 things. I try to keep it to 3 things to not have it be overwhelming, right? And to make it doable. On the VIP day, we actually make decisions about those things, or we have them done. In some cases, you're talking and I'm typing. We're making some plans. We're basically front loading what is the plan going to be for the next 6 months that we're going to coach on. Then we go into biweekly calls for 6 months. We meet, like I said, every other week, same day of the week. And then as you're doing the work and as things come up, and as you're just a human going through business and things are coming up, we voice message, we go back and forth. I coach you, I support you, I answer your questions, I will review things, whatever that is, I got you. And I love private coaching. I have been doing it for 5 years. And as much as like some people are like, have thoughts about it and want to get out of it and all these things, I'm like, private coaching is my favorite thing. I absolutely love it. I very much run my mastermind like that as well. If you're in it, you will also know. Everybody has their own plan and way of growth, and it's very, very like human centric. And the investment is $10K. It can be broken down into 6 payments for private coaching. And I have availability starting in May for that. But please do apply now, because I do book my spots in advance. And I have clients who are still waiting to onboard at the end of this month. And then we will start in May. Another option for coaching and working with me privately, and it depends. I have to advise it to you and make sure that it actually works, because I wouldn't advise this for just anybody. But I started at the end of last year offering month-to-month Telegram coaching for $700. So essentially, Telegram is an app. You can send text and voice notes on it. And the way that I now run it with Telegram is that we still do the big heavy audit at the beginning of your business and your thoughts about your business and what's going on in your life and like all the things, right? So we front load all of that. So a lot happens in the first month, but we don't start the clock on Telegram coaching until that's done, so that we can dive in with all of that information. So I will have information about your clients and your offers and like what you've sold and what you've tried and where you're marketing and where you're not marketing and like where your leads have found you. I have all that information. And then I know things like, what's your week, like, a typical week look like? What are your other responsibilities? Like all the other, like, does your family support you? Like, what does this all look like? I want to get the whole ecosystem. We will do that. And then once we have the audit and the clock starts on Telegram coaching, at that point, I start giving you little assignments, and I will respond with a Loom video. And I'm like, okay, I looked at your content. I looked at this. Here's what I see. Here are the gaps. Here's some questions to answer. And then I start to give you custom homework based on that to strengthen your positioning, make your offers clearer, make sure that it's speaking to an unmet need in the market and not just a niche. That is so huge, because sometimes you're selling something and I'm like, yes, but why? But why do people need it? What are they experiencing as a result of them not having it, right? So like we go down this whole process and then we go back and forth. So it's a blend of me coaching you and also strategy and messaging help. And, we could get a lot done in a month, but you also have the option at the end of the month to renew. And like I said, $700 a month Telegram coaching. I'm actually having a lot of fun doing it because I love sending voice memos, chatting with my clients. It actually like gives me energy. And so I really love being able to help people in that way. So get in touch. If that's something you're interested in, we do not have that listed on the website because and I don't do sales calls for that either, because it's a $700 offer, right? But best way you can get in touch with me is go to my Instagram at mariella.delamora on Instagram. Or if you go to my website, you can also send an email to my team. But I would say send me a message on IG I occasionally will go into my requests folder, because if I'm not following you, it will go into requests, but I will try my best. I go in there pretty regularly just to make sure if anybody's messaged me, because sometimes the requests fall into that folder. And yes, that is it. Let me know how I can support you. I hope this was helpful, and I will see y'all in the next episode.